It took me quite a long time to come back to the Shipwrights Way, so it was actually the beginning of February when I came back for my third day. I started at Rowland's Castle where I had left off the previous day. It was looking lovely on a beautiful February day. It was, as I said, such nice weather for all 3 days that I did, and this one in particular just felt so lovely and spring-like. You spend a bit of time in the woods after Rowland's Castle and then set off on a small road out into the countryside. There is then a section when you are in kind of a residential area as you head towards Havant. This stretch, I would say, was the second most unpleasant after that bit along the A3. It was quite a busy road and you were alongside it for quite a long time. There were some interesting things to look at, including these birds in somebody's garden alongside the road. I don't actually even know what they are, but they were very funny to see, very unexpected. After this residential section, you end up on this lovely cycled path going through a kind of marshy area. There were so many people out and it was just lovely to be enjoying this beautiful weather together, walking down this gorgeous cycle path along a pretty little stream. And then quite quickly you start to head towards Hayling Island. This is the bridge onto Hayling Island. It was very, very busy, so that was not as pleasant, but pretty quickly you were onto Hayling Island, and that was just gorgeous, especially on a day like it was with the sun and the spring feeling in the air, looking out over the mud flats and the water. I took a little detour out to the point soon after I got onto Hayling Island and then headed out along this causeway between these little bodies of water. There were so many water birds. I don't really know enough about them to properly have appreciated it, but if you do, you will be having a great time on Hayling Island. The main path here was actually closed when I walked through, so you had to head out closer to the edge of the water. It was a much more beautiful path actually, but particularly because everyone was being forced to use it, it did get very muddy. And it was interesting to see and read about the oyster beds and the other historic uses of this area, and to get to look out over the beach and the water. There was hardly any walking on shingle, which was much appreciated because I have done other walks where there was altogether too much walking on shingle. For much of this day I was walking with my face to the sun, so if my pictures are not of great quality, I apologize, and I hope you can get a sense of just how glorious the weather was, even if my phone camera was not able to capture it properly. At the end of the Hayling Island section, you walk through West Town, which was a nice little residential area. The highlight of this was the daffodils that someone had planted alongside the pavement, and one of them was actually blooming, which was amazing at the beginning of February. This plant actually had another stalk that had somehow been cut. You can sort of see it in the left side of this picture, and I actually ended up taking that home with me because I couldn't bear to leave it lying on the ground like that. When you turn right in West Town, I actually would advise that you take the path just a bit further along than the road, because the seafront road didn't really seem to be anything special, and there was a path that you could take just parallel to it, which, as you can see, the path was lovely, so I would highly recommend that. Once you cross the road though at the place that's marked gun sight on all trails, I would advise going back to the main road, because after that the path does get a bit overgrown and it's not necessarily worth the effort of staying off the road there. There was also a lot of information about the World War II Heritage Trail, so if that's something you're interested in, definitely have a mosey around this area. And then you are walking out towards the ferry. this section did not have pavement next to the road, but there were quite a few other walkers, and I think the drivers in this area are quite used to the walkers on the road, so just keep an eye and an ear out and be a bit careful. There were some bits of it that had a nice path next to the road, and before you know it, you are at the ferry terminal. Definitely check the ferry times if you're walking this path to make sure that you can take the ferry, because it is quite a long detour. I know somebody who had to take the detour and they were very sad to not be able to take the ferry. If you can, it's a lovely little ferry, and it's a very short journey across to the neighbourhood of Portsmouth called Eastney. You walk through this harbour on the other side, through a bit of a residential section, and then onto the Esplanade in Southsea and then in Portsmouth. This was quite a long walk along the Esplanade. I think it would have been really lovely as a stroll, but coming towards the end of a long day, I have to admit it did get a bit monotonous, but I enjoyed watching the waves, watching everyone else enjoying the waves. There were a lot of people on the Esplanade, so it's a bit of a shock after the quietness of the rest of this walk. You go past the South Parade Pier and then walk through some lovely grassy parks as you're coming into Portsmouth proper. You start to see the Spinnaker Tower in the distance, which is a really good encouragement that you are getting close to the end of the journey. I did climb up on a bank here that was not part of the path. You can definitely stay on this path that you can see down below, but I thought it would be nice to get a good view up here. Then you walk through part of the old town of Portsmouth, which was really nice. Some interesting statues and memorials. And duck down into this cute little footpath, walk alongside this nice marina with really lovely old boats. You do start to realize that you are in a city here. You start to have a bit more skyscrapers and a lot more people, but it is quite a nice section of Portsmouth that they take you through, except for the kind of shopping centre bit here, but that is brief. And then you come to the Portsmouth Historic Dockyard, which is the end of the walk. I actually have visited the Portsmouth Historic Dockyard before, so I didn't go into the dockyard itself, but if you haven't, this would be a fantastic way to finish the walk. It's definitely worth visiting. You could spend a whole day here, so maybe the last day of your walk should be quite short. But since I had already been, I just took this picture at the entrance and then headed back to the train station. And just as a little bonus, here is the daffodil that I picked up on Hailing Island. I carried it home in my water bottle, and that very evening it started to bloom, and this was the next morning, and it was just in all its glory. My room smelled like absolutely glorious springtime for almost a week afterwards. And this was the end of the Shipwrights Way. Would highly recommend this walk. It was really great fun, and it was a really interesting way to see a bit of the county next to me that I hadn't seen before. Thanks so much for watching, and if you have any questions about the Shipwrights Way, please feel free to leave them in the comments and I will do my best to answer. I think more people should do this lovely little trail, and happy walking!